Okay, welcome back to another video here on Let's Talk About It. I apologise I haven't uploaded for a little while. I've been travelling around China doing one or two projects, but I'm staying in Hangzhou right at the moment, so I'm doing one from the hotel because I think this is really important. Now, this coming weekend there's going to be trade talks between China and the USA. As right now, trade is pretty much at a deadlock, and it's been over a month into these trade war, and you're going to have containers very shortly starting to arrive at American ports, and in order to release the goods on those containers, the businesses in America are going to have to pay 145% tariffs. So for some time the US have been reaching out and calling China to try and arrange trade talks, but China have somewhat resisted, and then sort of later there says, okay, let's have a think about it. And then finally, China agreed to meet with the USA in Switzerland. Now, these are not major talks because these talks are being held on the sidelines of another event that is going on in Switzerland. However, representatives from China are going to meet Besant and other representatives from the US. And it's going to be interesting to see what the outcome of this is. Now, just on Friday, Trump posted on his social account that Truth Social account that he thinks the right number for tariffs will be 80%. Now, I don't know whether this is a number he's just pulled out the air, because later Lutnick went on interview on, I think it was Fox News, and he was suggesting that the right figure is 34%. It seems to just change all the time depending on what mood Trump's in and what American official you're speaking to. And this is again the problem with the US. There is no consistency. Now, China all along have said before any substantial negotiations can start that these tariffs need to be taken away altogether, reduced to zero. But Trump yesterday tweeted that he thinks they should be 80%. Now, I think doing a post like this just before the trade talks isn't going to help Matt at all. There is no way China are going to concede anything if the US still wants to keep 80% tariffs on trade. Now, don't get me wrong, I think some tariffs are a good thing for countries. Like, if you have strategic industries, that you should be manufacturing those things at home. But that's not China's fault that America are not doing that. If you look back, American companies were falling over themselves to rush to China to give their manufacturing to China so they could make bigger profits on what they sold into the US market. So I think for some strategic industries that America want to bring back home, and I think that's the same for all countries, you should manufacture strategic items in your own country, and tariffs are a very useful way of achieving that. But for everyday goods, just stupid. I mean, Trump tries to tell people that it's China who pays the tariffs, and that's just utter nonsense. It's actually American businesses and consumers who pay the tariffs. Now, I suspect the reason America is so desperate to get talks with China is because, as I said, right now containers with those higher tariffs are going to start arriving at US ports. Freight is somewhat 40% down, and that's arriving at US ports as well. So not only is high tariff goods arriving now, but also not as many goods as arriving now. So over the next 4 weeks, you're going to start seeing shortages of goods in the US. And even I have a friend, Matt from Nuance. If you know him, go check his channel. But he made a video how American retailers are already price gouging the consumers in America due to these tariffs. Anyway, back to Trump's 80% or 45% or 43% or whatever he's decided it is today. Then I really don't think that the Chinese authorities are going to go for that whatsoever. And then later on, he put on his Truth Social that, China needs to open the markets to American products. Now, obviously, if you spent any time in China whatsoever, or you are interested in China, you'll know that many American companies are very, very prevalent here in the Chinese market. Now, let me reel off just a few for you. So first of all, we have foods and retail services. So you have McDonald's, KFC, Pizza Hut, Starbucks, Walmart, Sam's Club, Dairy Queen, Domino's Pizza, Taco Bell, Costco. And then you look at large consumer goods companies. You have Unilever, who control a huge amount of brands that are sold into the Chinese market. Pharmaceuticals, you have Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson. Then moving on to IT, you have Nvidia, AMD, Intel, Qualcomm, Micron, Texas Instruments, Broadcom, Applied Materials, Lam Research, NXP Semiconductors. And these are just a few. You know, there are many, many more American companies operating within the Chinese market. Now, there's a statistic that came out not too long ago that shows that just last year alone, American companies made revenue of more than $1 trillion in the Chinese market. And many of these companies I've just mentioned. So let's take Qualcomm. They made 64% of their revenue from the Chinese market. You have, let's have a look, I don't know, let's look at KFC. Their revenue was $8.5 billion in 2024 in the Chinese market. So many of these American companies rely quite heavily on the Chinese market and make a large slice of their revenue in the Chinese market. Now, where Trump may be talking about, and this is never going to happen. So I think Trump wants, like China, to open its banking sector or its utilities sector to American companies. So basically they can come in and fleece the Chinese public. Well, that's not going to happen. You know, Chinese are not going to let Wall Street come in and start buying up banks. They're not going to let private American companies take over their utilities. So in China, all the utilities all the utilities and banks are part state owned, and they're controlled by the state. So, you know, lending can't be put, you know, to make profit first. It's Chinese state companies that control the rates, and it's Chinese state companies that control the cost of electricity and gas and other utilities like telecommunications. And that's why it's so cost effective for those things. So just to give you an idea, electricity is 5 times cheaper here in China than it is in the UK. But there's certain market sectors that China are just not going to let private equity get involved in. And I think that's a good thing. So where Trump is saying that Chinese markets need to be opened, I think, you know, Chinese markets are pretty open already. You know, you look at massive American companies that are operating here, Tesla, Apple, both of them making large amounts of their revenue from the Chinese market. So I think pretty much the Chinese market is certainly not closed to US companies. Now, on the other hand, you know, the American market is not that open to Chinese companies. Many places have forbid Chinese from buying land there. And then you look at things like semiconductors. You know, even America are forcing other countries to close their markets to China. If you look at semiconductors, now semiconductors is one of China's largest imports. Well, the US are forcing Japan and Korea not to sell semiconductors to China. They've put sanctions on TSMC. They've put sanctions on ASML. I forget, but the Dutch company that sells the large lithography machines to China. So I think unless the Americans sort of change their stance and come to the negotiation table giving China some respect and on equal terms, I don't think they're going to see a great change. I mentioned in a previous video, I went to the Canton Fair. The mood was pretty boyish, you know, pretty good. There was a lot of foreigners visiting there from many different countries. China have just had their April trade figures out, which were very, very good. Okay, fair enough that they're going to show a bit of extra trade as countries were forerunning these tariffs from Trump, but they're still very, very strong. And China is expanding its trade significantly to like Latin America and Southeast Asian ASEAN countries. So I think that the trade that China will lose to the US, they will soon make up in trade to other countries, especially in Southeast Asia. That's a big growth engine. And then later on from that, as African countries become more prosperous, there'll be a lot more trade in Africa. And I really feel that it's America who have a lot more to lose. And I think that's why America is so desperate to get a trade deal done with China. I mean, you hear Trump talking about, they've just done a trade deal with the UK, and they're PRing this all over the place. They're really pushing this as some fantastic deal, but really it's a bit of a nothing burger. Tariffs remain higher for the UK. They've done a little bit, but really it's more of just a framework for negotiations. But Trump and his administration are pushing this as if it's the best trade deal ever done. There's not much evidence that the US are doing trade deals with other countries. What really matters is the trade deal between China and the US, and that matters not just for those two countries, but for the whole of the world. Anyway, that's my take on it. I will do another video after the talks have taken place to see what the outcome is, but I'm not feeling confident that there will be a great deal of movement, because I think the American administration is still being pretty stubborn. When they're still talking about tariffs of 80% on a large number of goods, I think China are not going to be too interested. Anyway, from Hangzhou, for now, see you in the next one.